We've already formed a quorum. Let's start our meeting. I hope that after the long summer vacation, you still remember what bill we're scrutinizing. It's a long summer vacation. Well, between you and me, just a day of departure will mean a lot. Welcome. I'd like to welcome the attending officials. I think you're all familiar with them. Deputy Director of Environmental Protection, Mr. Albert Lam, Assistant Director of Environmental Protection, Mr. Samson Lai, Senior Government Counsel, Ms. Lina Lau, and Senior Administrative Officer, Ms. Libra Cheng, also from the EPD. Welcome, all of you. In fact, before the summer vacation, we've already started clause-by-clause scrutiny of the bill. To be fair, during the summer vacation, there are some correspondences. And at our last meeting before the summer vacation, Mr. Vincent Fang submitted some questions. And during the summer vacation, Mr. Wu Chi-wai also submitted some questions. And in the course of the scrutiny of the bill, members also asked some questions. And in the interim, the EPD had sent out some responses. Perhaps I should ask Mr. Lam whether or not he has anything to supplement on his reply or anything he'd like to emphasize. Basically, we repeatedly discussed certain issues. Basic information has already been provided by us. If necessary, we are very willing to supplement if members so wish. So the floor is open to you, colleagues. Please read the reply from the EPD as well as Mr. Wu Chi-wai's letter. Mr. Vincent Fang has not arrived yet. Colleagues, anything to follow up? Otherwise, we can continue. Mr. Wu Chi-wai, Mr. Chairman, perhaps I've been repeatedly asking the same questions. During the summer vacation, I submitted a question to request for basic information. I have certain concepts which colleagues may not agree to, but we can discuss. We would like to have full coverage, and by way of a no declaration mechanism, and no records will be required for the number of plastic bags distributed for the purpose of this levy. Then SMEs, I'm concerned that SMEs may incur huge costs as a result of this bill. So that's our worry. The mechanism has worked out well in the first stage. If in the second stage we'd like to have full coverage, if retail points are not required to record the number of plastic bags distributed, then I'm worried that the mode of behavior that we have worked out to establish may go down the drain. Well, 3,000 chain stores are covered. At the same time, public behavior has changed. I witnessed that many members of the public are now willing to take their own bags. Well, that has changed our concept on plastic bags. But if no record is to be required, I'd like to ask whether or not we will have a levy mechanism. Well, to change human behavior, we must spend long-term effort in launching such a mechanism. Otherwise, human behavior may revert. Now, look at these 3,000 chain stores and how much they cover. I'd like to have more details so that this both committee will be able to assess the views of the administration. We may, in the end, discover that the coverage will be very small. Say if eventually only 4,000 chain stores are covered, then that will be too few. After the summer vacation, the answer we get is that that would be all. So would we like to have full coverage? Or should the second phase of the exercise cover all chain stores? I think we'll all agree that for the retail industry, for shops or groups with more than 3 retail points, it is difficult for them to explain that they don't have a computer system to take stock of their commodities. So if they already have such a computer system, why should we cover all retail shops? Why should we give up this system that we've worked hard to establish? I don't see the data in the government's paper. Those are important data. Perhaps I should stop here. I'd like to have a one-off answer. Don't just tell us that there are no records. We should do our own estimation. That's unfair to us. Besides, how are you going to convince me and the public that members of the public won't revert to their previous behavior? Let me cite an example. In housing estates, if there's to be a levy, shops will refuse to distribute plastic bags, or members of the public won't be willing to take plastic bags. Otherwise, a storekeeper dares not refuse to distribute plastic bags to the public. Elderly customers may grumble. So I think what I'm asking for is lacking in the administration's answer. Mr. Lam, any response? Mr. Chairman, in the paper we've tried to provide the information that Mr. Wu wants. We only provide the information we have. For information that we don't have, I don't think we'll be able to provide them in the interim. We've also tried to obtain information, say, from the business registration office. So the direct answer is that because we do not have a mechanism to collect the information, we don't even have the information by way of business registration. That's why we're unable to provide the information in the paper. For full coverage of all retailers, we did refer to certain public suggestions that we should adopt a middle-of-the-road approach. The mainstream advice is that we should try as far as possible to head for full coverage. So we did not carry out in-depth studies into which chain store has 5 retail points, which chain store has 3 retail points, etc., etc. Well, Mr. Chairman, he has to answer another part of my question. Without the figures, you have to rely totally on the behavior of the buyer and purchaser in terms of the number of plastic bags distributed. And I can see that you're going to rely on spot checks. If that is the case, in a spot check, what sort of manpower, criteria, or undercover operations will you prepare to obtain the data? How can you convince me that under this method, members of the public will eventually understand your message? Now, you want the money go back to the retailers, and you want the retailers to take the initiative to do environmental protection. Otherwise, it's just like purchasing a commodity, and under the law, the proceeds will be pocketed by the retailers. So there will be public queries about this. Why should we enact a piece of legislation to put money into the pockets of retailers? In this Bills Committee, we did discuss this issue. After the summer vacation, can the administration give members more confidence that this piece of legislation can be enforced? Mr. Chairman, let me repeat that the basis of this bill is that a retailer has to impose a levy on plastic bags, wherein where necessary an exemption can be granted. The responsibility rests with the retailers. In disseminating the message, members of the public should understand that they should not randomly ask for plastic bags from retailers. I believe members of the public understand the criteria. As for law enforcement, in the past, members did remind us that we should not assume that everybody will try to make use of legal loopholes or evade statutory requirements. So we'll try as far as possible to make sure that the public abides by the law. We've contacted retailers of different scales and talked to various organizations. They told us that the status quo will be maintained. They will not readily give up the existing mechanism. As for the levy, we'll try to assist them. How can we make sure that they implement the bill? Publicity is part of it, and fine is another. In the initial stage, we'd like to do more publicity and education. We'll try to collaborate with various organizations. When we really have to enforce the law and take out prosecution and produce evidence, we're sure we have sufficient colleagues to do the work. And at the moment, we already have law enforcers to enforce the bill. And at the community level, we'll do monitoring. Many people have already proactively approached us. But for actual prosecution, that will be the duty of our colleagues. When the whole city is monitoring public behavior in this regard, I'm sure the bill can be enforced effectively. Well, Mr. Lam, have I heard you correctly or understood you correctly? In the first stage, retail outlets will be covered. They do have a system already, and you assured us that they would maintain the existing mechanism. In the second stage, are you telling us that those retailers who are interested will receive assistance from you, will provide them with information on statutory requirements? Some retailers have already told us that some of their retail outlets are already covered at the moment, some not. We've been discussing with them in terms of, say, staff training, customer liaison, etc., etc. They have proactively told us that they would conduct exchange sessions. They'll wait for all the implementation details to be announced.
So,
Mr. Wai Kwok. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to say something on the information provided by the Environmental Protection Department. I'd like to elaborate on the information on the number of franchised chains. Now, the EPD has provided some information on the retail floor area. Here it says that there is a high percentage, over 90% of retail establishments have a retail floor area of less than 100 square meters. Now, our common sense tells us that these small shops are mostly independent retailers or individual retailers. So back to our concern, for these individual retail establishments, if they are covered under the scheme and if it is mandatory that they followed the levy imposed at supermarkets and department stores, I don't think it's feasible. This is my point. It seems that there is majority view supporting it, and for major retail outlets and supermarkets, etc., they have a system of recording the number of plastic bags distributed, and regardless of the size of these retailers in the future, should the levy goes back to government revenue, well, yes, it may be possible, but at least there should be some record keeping. So I think once it is implemented, the retailers can make this decision. If it's a charge instead of a levy, then it's much more flexible. Now, another point is under the PSB levy scheme, the retailer must not impose the charge on customers on a mandatory basis. That is to say, only when a customer asks for a plastic bag can 50 cents be charged. And I think we do have a strong sense of environmental protection. This can be seen from the first phase of the PSB levy scheme, and also according to the reply to Mr. Vincent Fang by the EPD, the estimated levy income was 200 million, but in fact only some 20 million was collected in the end. So the scheme was very successful. It has totally changed people's behavior. Now, even if the levy income doesn't go back to the government, I don't think people's behavior will change in terms of the use of plastic bags. As for the effectiveness of the scheme, I think it's too early to say, and we must be very careful whether or how people's behavior will change as a result of introduction of this bill. Mr. Wu Chi-wai was quite pessimistic, but I am optimistic. So now, in relation to the first part of my question, do you have any further information to provide? It's difficult for you to answer me, perhaps, for the 60,000 odd retail outlets, how many of them belong to franchise stores or chain stores? According to the information here, over 90% of the retail establishments can be regarded as small retailers. Can I put it this way? We don't have any statistics in this regard. In my according to my impression, some retail establishments can be very small, and they can be chain store outlets as well. So that's depending on our own experience. We can go visit markets and shopping malls, and you will find that there are a large number of small individual retailers. Well, I think you need to make your own judgment. It's difficult for the government to answer your question. Dr. Priscilla Lau. Just to follow up on the last question, we encourage members of the public to report irregularities as a means of monitoring the implementation of the scheme, and this is effective in helping people change their behavior. Now, a point of follow-up. Last time I asked whether you had any target groups in mind, for example, the grassroots in the community, or those who require assistance the most. For example, elderly singletons, the government may provide more resources to target these groups of people. So do you have resources to take a step forward? I think we should avoid punishment as far as possible. We should help them change their behavior on their own initiative. Sometimes when I visit the community, the elderly people would tell me that with the charging scheme on municipal solid waste, they will be throwing rubbish off the building, and therefore it is important that we help them change their behavior. So it's a point on publicity and education, whether you have target groups. We will try to consider whether we can take on board Dr. Priscilla Leung's suggestions. But basically, this bill targets small retailers rather than customers. Of course, for small-scale retail outlets, we also would educate them. As for members of the public, it will be a territory-wide scheme. So publicity will be conducted territory-wide. And then we will look for target groups. After the first phase, I think many from the low-income group would probably refuse to pay the levy anyway. Then they have cultivated the habit of bringing their own bags. What about target groups for small retailers? Yes, we do have this target group. In terms of publicity for retailers, we will focus on these smaller retailers. As for larger ones that are members of trade associations, it will be easier for us. For example, they can exchange their experience on, or share the experience on the compliance with the scheme. So a follow-up question, will there be an additional manpower? Because these are individual retailers, and some may not be very familiar with the scheme. So will there be a dedicated team for the scheme? We will be collaborating with our partners, and when we discuss the details, we must first of all set down the details. For example, there is a requirement in the bill, and if we made slight modifications on members' request, then it will be difficult if we have had the discussion with the partners. So we must set down the details first. Yes, I understand. What about your so-called collaborating partners? Who are they? We have collaborating partners and green groups working with us. That's very clear. This bill targets retailers in terms of penalties, etc. Whereas for the community, we must explain to members of the community that they will not be arrested or imposed with a hefty fine, or things will be chaotic. So thank you, Dr. Priscilla, for a question, and thank you for giving Mr. Lam for clarifying the position regarding the target groups and the penalties. Now, members would have received the responses from the administration during the summer break on the questions asked. So if there are no further questions, we'll go back to the clause-by-clause scrutiny. Yes, Mr. Vincent Fang. Several points. Chairman, when the PSB scheme started, I had discussed with the administration On several occasions, Mr. Lam, I discussed with you. Initially, when the scheme started, the administration estimated that for the supermarkets or the 2,000-odd retailers covered under the first phase of the scheme, at that time, your estimate was that you were uncertain about the number of plastic bags. And I told the administration that your figure was way over our estimate. We thought that it was exaggerated. Now the government is saying that they estimated a 200 million levy income, but now it's just 20 million odd. So I need to reiterate this point. Our sector already told you that you have overestimated the number of plastic bags used. I need to make this point clear. Secondly, it is a good thing for us to use less plastic bags. The sector also supports the initiative. We don't understand why the administration doesn't look into whether the bags can be recycled. And for recycled plastic bags, they should not be white in color, but rather pink or other colors. And if you could recover the used plastic bags for recycling to be further distributed to supermarkets, etc., it will be a good idea. These recycled plastic bags would be pink or blue in color instead of white. And this will really save the number of plastic bags used. One final point about the quantity of imported plastic bags. Since the launch of the PSB scheme, the import of plastic has not declined. So I like the administration to explain why. If fewer plastic bags have been used, then shouldn't the quantity of plastics imported be less? Now, one final point is that you said it's easier for larger retailers like supermarkets to comply with the scheme because they have a computer system, etc. If the scheme is covered, is expanded to cover a wider scope, meaning SMEs will be covered, how can you ensure that they will comply with the scheme? Because first of all, the SMEs do not have the knowledge, and secondly, some goods like food stuff, they need plastic bags. Mr. Lam. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Fang, for your question. Now, in our paper, we mentioned the original estimate, whether we overestimated or not. We did set out a table, or we did provide the estimates and the actual use of plastic bags from 2008 to 2012, and it's correct that we have been overly pessimistic. And like Mr. Fang said, we have been overly pessimistic, so it now sounds the scheme has been a success, and I respect your viewpoint. Now, secondly, on the recycling of plastic bags. Well, theoretically, even if the plastic bags are torn, they can be put in the tricolor recycle bins for recycling. There is one bin for plastics, and they can be recovered. As whether it can be reused, well, after recovering the plastic bags, our recyclers would recycle the bags. Now, on foodstuffs, because of hygiene issues, some foodstuff items require plastic bags, and as a result, under our present proposal, these items are exempted. They will be falling outside the scope of the regulation.
Mr. Fang? I'd like to further follow up on plastic bags for food. The government is saying that if there are no holes on plastic bags, then a 50-cent levy will be imposed, but not otherwise. Well, there are different packaging for different food items. So how are we going to regulate the behavior of the retailers? Well, if it is a can of food, do we really need a plastic bag? Well, in the course of clause-by-clause scrutiny, a plastic bag for a can of food will need to be charged 50 cents. When in clause-by-clause scrutiny, say when we come to clause 18, on whether or not a plastic bag is needed for a food item, then we can discuss the details. Will consumers, retailers, etc. be misled? Well, we can discuss the details. Well, to be frank, it may not be a matter of whether or not there are holes. Maybe the properties and the quality of the food item involved will matter more. Mr. To, I'd like to further follow up on Mr. Vincent Fang's question. May I refer you to paragraph 13 of the paper, which is the administration's response. In that paragraph, the administration says that it would encourage retailers to make use of the proceeds for the purpose of environmental education. Well, the paper told us that on the average there would be a proceed of $26.5 million. May I know whether or not there are specifics? If we're only talking about ordinary stores or groceries on the streets, how can we enforce this mechanism? And what about the chain stores? Mr. Lam, would you please explain paragraph 13 to us? Paragraph 13 records the reaction of the parties concerned in the consultation exercise. They also told the media the same. I asked them, at the moment, plastic bag proceeds are passed to the government. What will they do in future? They told me that they would use the proceeds in future for the benefit of the public or for public interests, including environmental education. Well, Mr. Chairman, if no records are required for these revenue, then we'll never know whether or not they have implemented what they said. Are we going to expand the coverage of the whole scheme? We, of course, welcome the element of regulation. To me, the biggest difficulty is that no records will be required. Our colleagues also had reservation over this in the course of clause-by-clause scrutiny in the past. Oh, yes, that's true. So can we have the enhanced part retained? But for recording, when you answered Mr. Vincent Fang's and Mr. Wu Chi-wai's questions, you also said that retailers will be differentiated by their areas. The large chain stores have already got the equipment and mechanism. Can you ask them to still keep a record of the number of plastic bags distributed? Well, in the summer vacation, we did have some communication on this. We just want to ensure that you'll be able to implement the legislative intent. We don't see that element at the moment. Well, Mr. Chairman, we have this dual approach. In the first phase, there was a regulation mechanism. That mechanism will be maintained. And now we have the second phase. In the first phase, the revenue was passed to the government or retained by the retailers. As for Ms. Sito's question, we're not just talking about money now. We're also talking about information retention. So we have this dual approach. As mentioned in the paper, we find no reason for requiring companies or individual shops to adopt different mechanisms when they're operating more or less the same type of business. So basically, that's impracticable. As for the existing retailers under regulation, as I said, most of them will maintain the existing modus operandi. Plastic bags are just like goods in future. They'll keep a record on how many had been distributed. They will disseminate the data out of their own initiative. A dual approach is not that practicable. We'll only encourage them to make use of the revenue for charitable causes or environmental protection. And on various occasions, we also said that we would like to gauge the effectiveness of phase 2 when compared with phase 1. We'll also check at the landfills to see how many plastic bags had been disposed, to assess whether or not members of the public have been more relaxed or stringent in their behavior. Mr. Chairman, the government told us that the reaction of retailers in the first phase has been positive, and they'll continue to keep the data. Will they pass their data to the administration for dissemination? I believe that's totally practicable. As the feedback of the industry is so positive, this should be done. I think you should try to enhance the mechanism of information dissemination. Members of the public will be very concerned. This is about policy, about measures. I'll talk to the industry to see whether they'll handle this individually or centrally by the government. Mr. Vincent Fang, follow-up? Mr. Chairman, I'd like to follow up on the previous issue. The supermarkets have already got their own mechanisms for recording, so they can voluntarily submit the data to the government. At the same time, I'd like to talk about the SMEs. It's very difficult for them to take on additional tasks, and operational costs may also rise. And what about the raw materials for manufacturing plastic? That is, before you get a plastic bag or after a plastic bag is manufactured, you should try to gauge the amount of raw materials imported to see whether there's any change. Mr. Chairman, in the paper, we also mention import and export of plastic. But as I said, that may not be directly related to the distribution of plastic bags. So the Census and Statistics Department is subject to constraints. We don't see the correlation, so we do not look into that issue in depth. Do they have the statistics? Say if I'm a plastic bag manufacturer, how many plastic bags should I now manufacture? Do you have any figures for them? Mr. Chairman, we focus on the disposal of plastic bags. As for importing and manufacturing, we don't have the data. I understand, Mr. Chairman, you try to count the number of plastic bags taken out from the landfills, but that will not produce accurate statistics. I believe it will be very difficult for you really to count the plastic bags accurately. Sorry, I think the Bills Committee may not be able to handle all problems related to plastic bags. I believe the administration should go back and see how it can perfect the system, the regulatory system. Take, for example, the import and export of plastic bags, the disposal of plastic bags, etc., should also be looked into. Well, I think the administration will sooner or later face these problems. It cannot get off the hook. It's just that this Bills Committee cannot cover all problems. Mr. WU Chi-wai? My questions and Mr. Vincent Fang's are focused on in-depth studies, but the administration is telling us that in-depth studies won't be possible in the interim. Mr. Vincent Fang would like to have more detailed data on plastic bags. But we're talking about very important information and data. Apparently, the administration does not intend to carry out any survey or consider better methods for surveying. Is it that you know that you'll have sufficient votes to get this bill passed, so you're not going to give us the statistics? We're not favoring SMEs or so-called micro enterprises, as mentioned by Mr. Vincent Fang. We just want to take into consideration all issues related to plastic bags. I believe everyone participating in this process would like to know the answer. In the past 3 months or so, we've always been asking for this figure. We've always been told the figure of 64,000 tons. Now, an establishment, an enterprise with more than 3 outlets should not be considered as a micro enterprise. So tell us the exact figures so as to set our minds at ease. Mr. Vincent Fang, any feedback? Well, if we cannot obtain statistics from the administration through this formal channel, I won't be able to obtain the information. I don't think with only 64,000 SMEs or micro enterprises. I believe with more than that. Supermarkets and big companies have the manpower, computer systems, and all sorts of resources to comprehensively produce statistics. You say that you have to be fair to all enterprises. You must not target the 2,000 odd chain stores. To show that you are fair and just, you have to do something. I don't think you can really work on the micro enterprises. To follow on Mr. Vincent Fang's line of thought, it will be impossible for us to work on micro enterprises. Otherwise, we'll be adding to their burden. I just want to know how many enterprises will have the capability to observe your rules and regulations. We'll just count the number of chain stores. I believe the number of plastic bags used by them will be huge.
Larger retailers like IKEA, they don't need plastic bags, but I mean, they're not covered, but I think the number of plastic bags they use must far exceed the stores around the corner, and they are very capable of giving the statistics to the government. So if you don't ask these stores, which are able to keep a record of the plastic bags used, to give you this information, then will people's behavior be reverted to their original status? And what other tools do you have? The only means left would be for you to go to a landfill and count the number of plastic bags there. And still, this method is questionable. I have never witnessed any counting of plastic bags. I just trust that you will count them accurately. But this information is actually something that you can get. So please give us the information. Now, I think we should give Mr. Lam some time. As he said, he has been in touch with some larger retailers, and we will have to wait and see their response on whether they're willing to continue to keep a record of the plastic bags used. And I think Mr. Wu, as well as many other members, are very committed. They would like to see the effectiveness of the scheme after it's implemented. And we can then explore, after the bill is passed, whether a dual track system should be adopted. But what we can do at the moment is to urge Mr. Lam once again to consider whether anything or any amendments can be made. Mr. Fang, Chairman. Well, I think the PS has made the point that the dual track system is not fair and impartial, but I think if we adopt a dual track system, we can actually reduce the number of plastic bags used. For example, for supermarkets, we see that the scheme has been very effective. So let's not always talk about fairness and impartiality, because if you only think about these matters, you won't be able to come up with anything concrete. Just like the large fashion chain stores mentioned by Mr. Wu, they also use a lot of plastic bags. If we ask these larger retailers to take the lead, then they can do it, and the number of plastic bags used can be reduced. You want to look fair and just, and you want to take a broad brush approach on all large, small, or even micro enterprises, then that won't work. You can look at the first phase. It only covers larger retailers, and you get a levy income of over 20 million odd. And if you are minded to expand the coverage, and yet you want to be fair and impartial, then you can't really push ahead this piece of legislation. For larger retailers, they say that they cannot tell you the exact figures. And for smaller ones, the charges on plastic bags can be kept by them. And what kind of system is that? A dual track approach will be more effective. Now, to facilitate our discussion, we should explain what dual track system means. In the consultation paper, it said that some retailers would continue to be required to pass the levy income to the government, and some would be exempted. But since it's withdrawn, then we don't need to continue to discuss the dual track approach. But I just want to make it clear. Are we talking about a dual track system on the passing of levy income, or just reporting on the figures Now, Chairman, the dual track system that we're talking about is about this. For larger systematic retailers which we think are capable of providing the information to the government, I think they should be covered. I think we should expand the coverage to other retailers like fashion stores, chain stores that also use a lot of plastic bags. These should be covered, whereas for micro enterprises should be left outside the scope. Mr. Lam. Thank you, Mr. Fang, for your suggestion. I understand that if it is implemented in Mr. Fang's way, that is, the coverage should only include retailers which are larger, which are systematic, which can comply with the scheme more easily. This will be easier for us to implement the scheme. However, this view is against the views collected during the consultation exercise. The views collected are that the scope should be expanded to cover all retail outlets. And there is an understanding that in terms of smaller retailers, they would need to face higher administrative costs, and as a result, we think that they don't need to keep a record of the plastic bags used, so that the administrative costs would be lower. And this is in fact based on the views collected during the consultation, Ms. Sit Ho. Now, fairness and impartiality doesn't mean absolute equality. Now, just like the MTR handrails, they may be accessible by adults but not for school children. But we all need handlebars to hold on to. And if the handrails are set at too high the height, then some may not reach them. So for those capable of following the scheme, they should be included. If you expand the coverage too wide, it will be difficult for the government to conduct inspections. Now, if you expand the coverage to include fashion chain stores as well, then at least Mr. Vincent Fang's stores will be covered. And in terms of his personal interests, it will be undermined. Mr. Fang was talking about passing the levy to the government. So Mr. Fang has not spoken to defend his personal interest. Mr. Wong Ting Kwong, if you did the same, I would praise you in the same way. So I think we have been talking about the same point. Some have been following the practice. It has been effective, and we should not relax the rule all of a sudden. Now, regardless of the types of plastic bag and whether the levy should be passed to the government or not, I think the same practice should be retained. That is to say, these retailers should be required to pass the levy income to the government. If they don't need to, even if they don't pass the levy back to the government, I don't have much objection, because after all, they need to pay for the administrative costs. Now, my major concern is that at least a record should be kept. So, Chairman, subject to your agreement, I think at this stage we can make this suggestion. In terms of business turnover and retail floor area, I think a line can be drawn based on these two criteria, so that more capable, larger chain stores and retailers can continue to fulfill this responsibility. And this committee perhaps can draw the line and see if the administration is willing to make amendments. If not, the Bills Committee can propose an amendment. And even if a majority vote cannot be reached here, individual members can propose CSAs. I don't think the administration will propose an amendment at this stage. Now, even the business sector is willing to do it this way. Mr. Vincent Fang is from the business sector, and he is willing to expand the scheme to cover his own stores. And yet the administration has refused to budge. And the administration has talked about consultation, but who have been consulted? Well, this is a public consultation, I guess, Mr. Wu Chi-wai. I really need to refute to Mr. Lam's point. I think there were two concepts involved in the consultation exercise. The first one is to expand the scope of the scheme, and the second is to think about the compliance costs. However, the possible link or the possible options between the two has never been put in the consultation exercise to the public for them to consider. So what kind of consultation is that? Throughout the meetings, I have been making the same point. I'm saying whether those capable retailers should be subject to a more relaxed rule, so that originally they're required to keep a record, and yet under the second phase they're not required to make a record of number of plastic bags used. If we look at the 3,000 odd large retailers, in terms of number of plastic bags, they contribute about 15% or 1/7 of the total plastic bags disposed of at the landfill, and the number has dropped. So we're talking about the very large share of contribution comparing to the total number of 64,000 retail outlets. And since implementation of the scheme, the figures have dropped very drastically. So you should consider further whether more large retail outlets should be included under the scheme. Now, using this information that you've provided, you said that for large retail outlets, they mean a retail floor area of not less than 200 square meters. For smaller retail shops, another major user, which are small retailers, bakery shops. I think we're just exercising our common sense. Let's go out in the street and see whether these larger retailers should provide statistics for us to make assessments and estimates so that we can gauge the effectiveness of the second phase of the scheme, so that this change in people's behavior in the use of plastic bags can stay permanent. This is an important point. I don't want people to go back to their old ways. So if the administration is not willing to propose an amendment, and I am going to propose a CSA, whether it can be passed or not is another matter. Well, perhaps I made a wrong estimate. I estimated 3 or above. I won't rely on floor area. I think for a chain store of 3 retail outlets or more, definitely there will be a computer system recording their stock. Well, I think members have expressed their views and the administrations have heard them loud and clear. So it's up to the administration to decide whether they would push ahead the amendments or not. And I think we have the same, we share the same goal. Mr. Lam, I think you should not be mistaken, because members only want to improve the scheme. We don't want the rules to be relaxed after the implementation of the second phase of the scheme. I think as we go along our discussion at the appropriate junctures, I would further seek members' views on their proposed amendments, and please give us your proposed amendments as soon as possible for consideration. Mr. Vincent Fang, you raised your hand again. I am going to say something that may not be very relevant to this bill. There are 2 points. The first one, now in the mornings at newspaper vendors very often sell newspapers in a plastic bag, and I think first of all this can be saved. And secondly, we have a lot of free newspapers now in the market, and these free newspapers are made of paper, and we're talking about environmental protection, and very often these unread free newspapers just go to the landfill. And in the free newspapers there are a lot of advertisements, so perhaps the government should impose a levy on them because they're using abundant resources. So I think we can save up on these 2 matters. Well, this may not be relevant to this bill. In fact, the first point is relevant to this bill, and during the public hearing, Newspaper Vendors Association came and advocated the saving of plastic bags because it will increase their costs, etc. Mr. Lam? Well, just to supplement our newspaper vendors, you've made a very correct point. They should be included, and let me explain why. Many newspaper vendors operate on a very small scale. They would like to include them in the second phase of the scheme, and they have told us, if they're included, that it's impossible for them to keep a record of the bags used because in the mornings they may be doing, there may be a lot of selling activities, and it's still impossible for them to record the figures. So subject to the committee's views, if we were to expand the scope, we need to make some choices. That is, at the same time, whilst expanding the coverage, we must lower the administrative cost to a level acceptable by smaller retailers.
If we draw a line by using 3 shops as the threshold, in the course of consultation, we're told that there are no reasons for drawing such a line. Otherwise, different types of businesses may be under different modes of regulation. That is, for a certain modus operandi, the enterprise may be regulated, but if the enterprise operates in another modus operandi, it may not be regulated. So we must justify ourselves when we do such a differentiation in terms of regulation, but we don't find any justification. So colleagues, let's go back to clause by clause scrutiny. We're at clause 10. May I refer you to paper 1171/01. I believe you've still got the paper. We're on 18A. Mr. Lam, or any other representatives from the administration? Mr. Chairman, Last time we're on 18A bracket 2. Mr. Chairman, do you want us to start from 18A or from 18A bracket 3? Well, if it's acceptable to colleagues, let's start from 18A3. The provision stipulates that the seller must not offer any rebate or concession to the customer to offset the amount charged. This is under the existing section 23(5). So we're just moving that provision here to 18A. Colleagues, any question? If not, please continue. 18A4 is an ancillary provision to implement certain provisions under phase 2 of the scheme. This is mainly targeting retail activities. Wholesale activities will not be covered. That is to manifest the policy objective of the scheme. 4B is a regulation found in phase 1 as well. That is, a reference to a plastic shopping bag includes anything that can be easily turned into a plastic shopping bag. This is to prevent enterprises from distributing plastic bags in another form. Well, sorry. Colleagues are raising their hands. Let's listen to the colleague from the DOJ first. Mr. Chairman, I think members have been very meticulous in this scrutiny exercise. They've spotted the question mark. They would like to know what 4B refers to. That is, anything that can be easily turned into a plastic shopping bag. Members would like to know what that actually means. Mr. Chairman, there is a specific definition for plastic bag in the bill or in the ordinance. Some shops, in order to evade the levy, may manufacture something that does not directly come under the ordinance. But by easy acts like tearing off, that article may be turned into a plastic bag very easily. That's why we're proposing such a stipulation. In the first phase, we've not observed any shops using this means to evade the provision, but we'd like to perfect the ordinance. That's why we'd like to retain this provision in phase 2. Well, it's difficult for me to find an example. Like Doraemon can be converted into a shopping bag, but it's difficult to imagine what methods can be used for such conversion. I believe high costs will be incurred if such an object is to be manufactured. And the costs incurred will be so high that I don't think the levy can be offset. I find this rather strange. Yes, you find this interesting. You're an engineer. Well, maybe you can think of any method of doing so. Well, even as an engineer, I can't think of any method as such. Ms. Sito, yes, I think members also find this very strange. But I have a question about the word easily in English. That's hengyi in Chinese. that will make it very difficult to argue. That is, if something can be easily turned into a plastic bag, it will be covered. But if it cannot be easily turned into a plastic bag, it will not be covered. So if you want to cast your net wider, you should not build in such a restriction. Well, it's very difficult. Sorry, Mr. Chairman, it's easy to tell what's meant by easily. So please give me a concrete example then. Don't be so vague and abstract. Just test our common sense. See whether we can determine whether any act is easy or difficult. Mr. Chairman, I really can't find another word to describe this. I'll accompany you in this crazy exercise. Don't include the word easily, otherwise in future there'll be disputes. It's nothing crazy. This concept of being easily turned into a plastic bag is already in phase 1. As far as I can remember, well, because I also participated in the enactment of the existing ordinance. I think back then we cited the example of a completely sealed plastic bag. There's a line for you to tear off, and then the object can become a plastic bag. Fortunately, no operators or traders were discovered to have adopted such a method to evade the ordinance. So we're only copying this from the first phase. All right, so you're only copying the provision word for word into phase 2. If I heard Mr. Lai incorrectly or not perfectly, he should correct me. Well, I think we're talking about criminal liability. Under the existing ordinance, or even in this blue bill, there's a definition for plastic shopping bag. The definition has already been amended. It now appears in Schedule 1. Any bag who is wholly or partly made of plastic, well, unless I find another specific definition for bag, I'll only give the word bag a definition from the viewpoint of normal language. That is, it is a container with an opening. So any bag is the premise. Well, Mr. Lai mentioned shape, but nothing is mentioned in the existing ordinance about shape. Rather, function, the function of the object is the focus. May I refer you to 1840. Anything that can be easily turned into a plastic shopping bag. That is, a plastic shopping bag. Apart from Doraemon cited by Dr. Lo Wai Kwok and the shape mentioned by Mr. Lai, what else can we think of? If one day we have to construe this provision, what is actually in the mind of the administration? What actual object the administration has in mind? Oh yes, please give us an example to illustrate yourself. Mr. Lam or Mr. Lai, if you can't give us any example now, then we may need to shelve this for a while. Well, Mr. Sito suggested just now that the word easily should be dropped. If we have a very clear definition for a plastic bag. Do we still need this provision here? From what Mr. Lai said, I can only think of those toy dresses many years ago that children had for their dolls. So you are actually dropping even the specifications for a plastic bag. So all sorts of materials for the production of a plastic bag should be covered. Now in Schedule 1, Section 1, you have the definition plastic includes polyethylene, polypropylene, polyvinyl chloride, and nylon. And there is a handle hole, etc., for the bag. So why do we still need this additional provision? Well, the schedule was cited just now about shape. And then there is this word shopping. Shopping does carry a meaning. The bag is for the purpose of shopping. For example, in shopping malls, bags are provided for holding umbrellas. I believe those are plastic bags, but they are not for shopping purpose. The coverage of second phase will be broad. Many shops will be covered. For example, when it rains, many shopping malls will provide plastic bags for umbrellas. But these plastic bags are not for shopping purpose. They're just to prevent from the umbrellas from wetting the floor. But they're not for shopping purpose. Let me respond to your legal advisor. When we drafted the amendment bill, we mainly made reference to our experience in the first phase. In the first phase, there was this provision. If this provision is to be retained in phase 2, there won't be any problems. Rather, it will make the regulatory regime more perfect. That's why we've moved it to 18 capital A, bracket 4, bracket B. If necessary, we can have further discussions.
So Tony Chair asked about the plastic bag for umbrellas. In fact, such plastic bags fall under the definition of plastic bags. However, this bill targets retail goods at retail outlets, and as these bags are for umbrellas, they will not be included. Now, I talked about the word shopping, and now you talked about the word retail, retailers, so it's another element. Now, what about if the bags are distributed for free? You talked about the shape. Now, for bags for umbrellas, they are oblong in shape. What about bags in the shape of an umbrella? Chairman, in Schedule 1, there will be some amendments on the definition of plastic bags or plastic shopping bags, and I think this is relevant to our discussion. Now, you talked about some examples and you've clarified these examples. What about the ones I mentioned? As the legal advisor said, it's very clear that it's a plastic bag. It's also included within the scope of plastic shopping bags or bags used at retailers. Now, Chairman, I don't have an answer. I hope the administration would consider it. Of course, they say that previously the provision is already there and it should be kept. But now we are amending the ordinance, and maybe the administration should consider whether it will affect retailers or smaller retailers. Mr. Ho. Now, if the administration is being so prudent in including this phrase that anything can easily be turned into a plastic shopping bag, then I don't have much objection. But my concern is with the word easily added, it will cause a lot of disputes in the future. You talked about the bag which is wholly sealed without any opening, which can easily be turned into a plastic shopping bag. What about a paper bag with laminated plastic on top of it? You say this will also be included. Now, if we have something like papercraft folding toy, and one can easily fold the paper into a plastic bag and add a plastic handle on it. Of course, I agree that you want to put a very broad provision to include all, but let's do it properly. I'm sorry, last time I wasn't a member of the Bills Committee. Well, it doesn't mean that the existing provisions must be correct. Last time we might have overlooked this point, but this time we haven't. So perhaps the administration should go back and consider taking this word out to avoid disputes. Well, I think this word easily may be necessary because, let me cite an example. A shopping mall may be giving away, say, balloons or simple plastic toys to children for free, and such plastic items might be turned into a plastic shopping bag. And these retailers might be caught, although they have no intention of circumventing the legislation. That is because the plastic toy may be turned into a plastic bag, and that is why I think the word easily should be included. We can't say that this provision is wrong in itself, but again, it's beyond my imagination that a retailer would do something to try to give away the plastic shopping bag to a customer for free just to avoid charging the customer 50 cents. I think it's just for the sake of environmental protection. I don't think the retailers are really minded to charge 50 cents. It's really difficult for me to imagine such a scenario. So I'm not too concerned about it. If you really want to keep the same provision, then I don't have much objection. Mr. Wu Chi-wai. Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Tony Chair talked about bags for umbrellas. There are many exhibitions in Hong Kong, and in an exhibition, you may be given plastic bags for free. They might be for non-sale purpose. They might only be for the holding of brochures. Now, how would this be dealt with if the materials contain plastic? Mr. Lai, this provision doesn't specifically says, say, the venue of the distribution of bags. So this PSB levy scheme equally applies to a trade fair or an exhibition. And during the consultation, we have reminded retailers of this point. And for other pieces of legislation like the smoking ban, they have been complying with them as well. So we'll update them on the development of this piece of legislation so that the organizers can fully communicate the new developments with the participants. Chairman, may I follow up on my point? Now, the organizers may be distributing plastic bags covering, say, 10 companies. The bags will be used as tool of publicity. So, will this be covered? To a certain extent, those plastic bags for umbrellas may be a tool for publicizing or promoting the whole of the shopping mall. Will this be covered?
第一個問題嗰方面咧，其實真係好個別嘅例子咧，都要睇返咁。
We really need to look at the operation of a particular trade fair. Very often the trade fairs may be for the purpose of negotiation, and the bags may be distributed, but no retailing activities may be involved. So it's not under the scope of this bill. For other exhibitions like the food festival or the book fair, very obviously retail activities are involved, and we will liaise with the relevant parties and keep them up to date with the latest development. As for bags for umbrellas, there are a lot of concerns. Is it a promoting strategy? I think it's stretching a bit too far, because we're targeting retailers, and I think it's the property management of the shopping mall that is responsible for the umbrella plastic bags. So I think it's stretching a bit too far to say that these bags or umbrellas are for the promotion of a particular retailer. So it's not a major target under this bill. I think members should not only focus on the venue. It depends on whether any retail activities are involved. So, like Mr. Chair's example just now, if an umbrella is sold and if it comes with a plastic bag for free, then this will be subject to the regulation. Otherwise, it would not. So it's to do with the activities involved rather than the venue. Sorry, Dr. Long Wai Kwok, followed by Mr. Tony Chair. Thank you, Chairman. I've been in the industrial sector for many years as an exhibitor, seller or buyer, or just attendees. I think the bags distributed at an exhibition is used for, say, holding catalogs and brochures, so there is a practical need. If this falls under the scope of the bill, then I think we'll be opening up a brand new topic for lengthy discussion. Now, for bags distributed at shopping malls for holding umbrellas, I think in terms of safety, again, there is a practical need. Water dripping from umbrellas will not only bring about hygiene problems within the mall, it will also cause public safety concerns. The floor may become slippery, and people might trip and fall as a result. So again, we'll need to have another lengthy discussion if we're to include this in the bill. So it's a matter of practicality. I have reservations whether they should be included as well.
It's good for us to raise these points. If we're not clear about any aspect, we should try to seek clarification. Well, sometimes I may not understand certain issues, but others may understand. Here, promotion of goods is mentioned. Sometimes it's promotion of services rather than goods. Even in our profession, as architects, we also promote our services. Theoretically speaking, services are not goods. When it comes to an exhibition, participants may be promoting engineering products. Others may promote engineering services. If the law is not clear, it will be troublesome. The public doesn't know how to follow the law. For myself, sometimes I'm not sure about certain aspects. For example, schools provide education, and in exhibitions or on other occasions, plastic bags are distributed. Will they be covered by the bill? I think we need to be very clear on all aspects. We should try to avoid omissions. Don't just copy the provisions word for word from one place to another. Any response, Mr. Lai? Concerning exhibitions, may I elaborate? Exhibitions have different nature. Education was mentioned just now. Participants may also be retailers. They may be selling books, for example. So I think we really have to look at the actual circumstances surrounding an exhibition. We did discuss with the Exhibition and Convention Center. Participants of exhibitions have to understand clearly the statutory provisions. Now, when the details are finalized, we can further talk to the Convention and Exhibition Center, and they will in turn be able to assist exhibition participants. Sometimes overseas enterprises come to Hong Kong to promote their services or goods. Sometimes they may just be promoting school places. They would like to enroll students. So if plastic bags are distributed on those occasions, will they be covered by the bill? Legal advisor? Legal advisor, a follow-up question? Yes. I just want the administration to clarify the series of questions asked by members. Perhaps I can subdivide members' questions into smaller questions for easier assimilation. Let me cite the example of exhibition. Let us start from there. According to 18 capital A in this blue bill, we're talking about the vendor. Let me cite an example. The Exhibition and Convention Center organizes an exhibition that welcomes enterprises to set up booths in the exhibition. And the venue is a coordinated venue for the exhibition. Individual participants sell their own products, such as books. Now, the framework is like this. If it is a book exhibition, members of the public who visit the exhibition may receive plastic bags. Will such plastic bags be covered? That is, the organizing institution is not a vendor in itself, but will it be covered by this blue bill? Administration? Mr. Chairman, if you read 18A2, you see that we're mainly talking about the vendor. That is the seller. If an institution is neither the vendor nor the vendee, then it will not be regulated by the blue bill. All right. Legal advisor? Now, let's look at members' questions just now. 18 capital A is continuously talking about goods sold in a retail format. Does the word goods cover services? No. I hope these two questions have helped members to understand the coverage of 18A and the regulatory framework spelled out by it. Thank you very much. Colleagues, let's move on. Sorry, Mr. Wu Chi-wai, you'd like to go back to 18 capital A? Yes, 18 capital A. I have a problem with reading 18A. Directly or directly providing plastic bags to customers, or plastic bags for pre-packaged items. And then the vendor will have to collect a levy. So if the pre-packaged items are less than 10 in number, less than 10 items of pre-packaged items, then no levy will be required. It's a reading issue. Last time we also cited a concrete example. The provision has a wide coverage. Garbage bags, Ziploc bags used in kitchens, etc. will also be covered. Basically, we're talking about pre-packaged items. Normally, you have more than 10 items for such goods. Well, if $5 is charged for one pack, that will cover all the 10 items. I mean, the levy will cover all the 10 items. But if the number of items exceeds 10, then the items should be charged separately. This provision targets garbage bags for packaging, right? If it is 50 cents for one garbage bag, what if there are more than 15 items in one pack? I pay only one levy. If you count the bags one by one, each garbage bag will sell more than 50 cents. If in a pack there are more than 10 items, that pack can be considered as one item. I'd like to follow up on Mr. Wu Chi-wai's question. Just now, Mr. Lai explained to Mr. Wu what should happen to a pack of 10 items, pre-packaged items. I would like members to jump to Schedule 2 together with me. Schedule 2 is also amended under this bill. Schedule 2 sets out plastic shopping bags excluded from the application of the ordinance. May I refer members to the marked up copy. In this amendment exercise, in Schedule 1C should be Schedule 2, 1C is stipulated that subject to this ordinance, subject to subsection 3 of the ordinance, a bag that contains either unpackaged goods or more than one piece of goods and is sealed before the goods are supplied to the seller concerned, blah, 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 is spelled out. Mr. Lai cited the example of 10 garbage bags. Before the garbage bags are delivered to the supermarkets, they're already packaged into packs. Now, if I use Mr. Lai's example, then under Schedule 211C, pre-packaged items have already been handled. Each garbage bag may not be packaged before it reaches the supermarket, but before these garbage bags are delivered to the supermarkets, they are already packaged in packs of 10. Does that scenario fit into this provision? So for 18A, how should it be differentiated from Schedule 211C in terms of pre-packaged items of more than 10? Mr. Chairman, we drafted the provisions in such a manner in order to clarify the situation. The situation is more complicated in Schedule 2. In 18A2, fresh food bags, garbage bags, which are very common commodities, will be handled by 18A2. Can 18A2 match Schedule 2? Not all commodities are prepackaged when they reach the retail outlet. Mr. Chairman, to assist members in understanding the provisions, apparently the amended 18A is talking about pre-packaged packs of 10 or more, provided by the seller directly or indirectly to the customer. But such items may not be pre-packaged before selling or before distributing to the retailer. It may be the retailer who packs the items into prepackaged packs of 10. So 18A is talking about the seller at the retail point. But Schedule 2 may be talking about the distributor who packs the items in prepackaged packs of 10 or more and delivers those packs, prepackaged packs, to the retailer. Secondly, when you talk about prepackaged packs, how do you count the number of plastic bags involved? 10 plastic bags plus 1, that is the outside package, or only the 10 plastic bags inside the pack? In the former case is 11 plastic bags. In the latter case, is 10 bags only. So, where and when should I levy the 50 cents on the customer?
Mr. Lai? We need more time to sort this out. Maybe I had a brief exchange with the law draftman, and we agree that the outermost bag will not be counted as one of the 10. Okay, so much for the clarification. I just want to make sure what it covers. Thank you. And now we understand the original intention of the bill. That's for members' reference. So can we move on? 18 to capital A4. Now, members have raised a point about easily turned into a plastic shopping bag. So the administration would go back and think about this point. So it will be left as it is for the time being. Now, 18A5 refers to sale. Sale includes a display or offer for sale, so it's not just about completed transactions. Any questions from members? Please continue. Subsection 6, there are two parts. A refers to the bag as an individual item. Or single item of goods, so it's provided in addition to the item sold. All right, moving on, 18B. Offences related to the bill, and it's the same as the offences and penalties imposed in the first phase. For first conviction, the person will be fined at level 6. And on each subsequent occasion, the person will be liable to a fine of $200,000. Members, please go on. 18C. Now, this provision also exists in the first phase of the scheme. Many chain stores operate on the basis of franchises. And if a particular franchisee commits an offense, then the franchisor commits an offense, and this provision is moved to this part, but the meaning is the same. Chairman, starting from section 19, we're going to delete some provisions applicable to phase 1, but not to phase 2. So these provisions will be repealed. Section 19 is in relation to the registration requirements of some prescribed retailers. But during phase 2, this requirement no longer exists, so the provisions will be repealed. Section 20, also on register, the Director of Environmental Protection shall keep a record of the register, and again, this no longer applies. 21, it's a simple amendment to the schedule. That is, the Secretary may, subject to the approval of LegCo, amend the schedules. Division 3. The whole division can be repealed. The division is about the obligations of registered retailers, but during phase 2, we don't have registered retailers, so these provisions will be repealed. So much for Division 3, it will be repealed, and then Division 4A will be added. It has to do with fixed penalty so that fixed penalty may be imposed on summary offences. And maybe I will invite Ms. Lau to take us through this relevant part. Division 4A, fixed penalty and related provisions. This division is in relation to fixed penalty. The whole division is drafted by making reference to other pieces of legislation like the smoking ban, and they also have fixed penalty provisions. For example, under 28A, the director may give penalty notice. And there are also other provisions, for example, on receipt of the demand notice or the notice, if the fine is not paid, or if there is a dispute on the notice, what happens? These provisions are rather technical, so I'll see if legal advisor has any questions. Legal advisor, Ms. Lee, please. Now, I'd like the administration to assist us. We see under Division 4A, we're talking about fixed penalties for specified offense. So, in this bill, what is meant by specified offense of offenses? 28A4, Chairman, may I refer you to this provision? It sets out the offense under Section 18B1, and that is the charge not being or levy not being collected when the PSB is distributed. So I'd like to assist members on understanding the provisions. If we look at the specified offense as mentioned by Mr. Lai, specified offense refers to two parts. That's 28A4 and then A and B. So it's either contravening Section 18A to A. So if we go back to 18A to A, in short, at the time of sale, the seller must do so and so, that's 2A, or if the seller is offering a rebate or discount to the customer with the effect of directly offsetting the amount charged under subsection 2, and that is at the time of sale, and that specifies the time of offense. And also for contravening Section 18A3, in short, the seller must not offer any rebate or discount to the customer which directly offsets the amount charged under this law, and the charge as proposed by the administration is 50 cents. So, as members may be aware, not all provisions under 18A are specified offences. For example, 18A, 2B or 2C, etc. What the administration does is they specify the time of offence, and that is at the time of sale. And the fixed penalty is only applicable, according to this bill, to the specified offences here. So, would members please note this point? Perhaps you should explain why you're narrowing the scope to just 18A. What about 18B or 18C? Now, 18A, there are two offenses. One is that the seller hasn't charged the customer, and the second part is the offering of a rebate or discount. And under 18A2, there are three circumstances. A is at the time of the sale, B B is for promoting the goods. That is, once the customer steps in the shop, the seller offers a plastic bag, and these are included. And whilst we prepared the bill, we sought legal advice, and according to the guidelines, fixed penalties should be imposed on simpler offences. So I think there'll be less disputes if the offence is about not charging the customer the plastic bag. Whereas for other circumstances, it would be more appropriate for the court to deal with these cases. So we're not trying to narrow down the scope. We're just excluding more complex situations. So I think members are clear on the enforcement of this provision. 18A, that's very clear. A fixed penalty ticket can be issued, whereas for other offences, these cases would be brought to court for consideration of the circumstances. Ms. Lee, I have another question, also on Division 4A, but on 28B under Division 4A. 28B bracket 1, in the English text, the heading is no prosecution or conviction if compliance with penalty notice. And then bracket 1
has been given a penalty notice in respect of an offence. 係咁個中文。
So in the Chinese text, this section applies to a person who has been given a penalty notice in respect of an offence. So I'd like to ask the administration to explain to us, under 28B bracket 1, an offence. Does it refer to the specified offence cited above? Yes. Division 4A is only applicable to a person who has committed a specified offence. And by specified and only on specified notice offence would notices be given. And 28B is on fixed penalty notice. So here 28B bracket 1, a penalty notice in respect of an offence means a specified offence. Now my question is based on the fact that in 28B bracket 2, sometimes the offence is set out. In fact, 28ABC all refer to specified offence. Am I correct? Members, this meeting is scheduled to end at 4:30, and I think at this moment we should pause here, and then we can continue with this class-by-class scrutiny next time. The Secretariat has informed us that the date of the next meeting is the 22nd of October, Tuesday, 10:45. We've reserved 2 hours for this, for the discussion of the bill. And I think in terms of policies and other specific issues, members have raised some suggestions, and perhaps the administration could go back and discuss with colleagues how these matters of members as well as the public's concern can be dealt with, so that people's behavior on using less plastic bags would not be reverted, or about the point easily turned into a plastic shopping bag, as mentioned by Sid Ho. There should be more examples, so we can all go back and think about these issues. Meeting's adjourned. See you next time. Thank you.